So, hi everybody. I'll hide the deltagare from there. So, okay, let's switch to English. Unfortunately, I understand Swedish, but prefer to speak in English. So, the topic of today is on-farm experimentation and how that can help in accelerating learning and climate adaptation. So learning is something we all want to do. Climate adaptation is something we all have to do. But experimentation is something we don't have to do, but it can be fun and it can be a tool towards both learning and climate adaptation. So I tend to introduce myself that I'm a farmer who does science contracting. So some farmers do snow plowing contracting or firewood contracting. I'm a farmer who does research contracting currently for the Finnish Environment Institute and Carbon Action and some work for the University of Helsinki also. So a lot of this involves experimentation. And now I'll see if I can change the slide in a Zoom environment. No, there's the button. Yes, great. Not my laptop, not my thing, but yes, but a familiar topic. So great. I don't know which of you are farmers, but I guess most of you know farmers. And what's kind of fun in farming and kind of crazy at the same time is that, first of all, from an ecological viewpoint, it's crazy that farming is legal in a way. If you would throw any other ecosystem, like a lake or a forest, you would start to do like manipulations on what species are there, how many, how do we fertilize, whatever, it would be stopped immediately. But for farming, it's been like going on for a long time, and somehow society thinks it's a beneficial thing to kind of people to run experiments on ecosystems every year. And that's the only way to get food, so maybe that's the reason it's legal. So, but if you think about farming for a while and a crop year, which like a crop year starts from planting a crop, harvesting it, and then planting the next crop. What kind of decisions happen there? What can you change? What decisions do you have to make? So write a bit in the chat maybe. Think about the topic. What can you change? Is anybody writing? So, waiting.
Det är en inbjudan till att det här är en inbjudan till er att tänka på den här frågan och skriva vad ni tror i chatten eller vad ni tycker.
There's something there. Wait a second. Yeah. What to sow? Yeah, how to prepare the soil. Today I was at a local farm, Mossagården, and the farmer said that when they plant fiber hemp, they have 102 varieties to choose from, and it can be overwhelming. Like, okay, so which is the correct one in a way? So that's a critical thing. And then before even that, there's the decision like, do I grow hemp or onions or beet or rye or which of the species? So it's kind of, you don't get this with somebody who's managing a river or a lake that, hey, what fish should be there this year? Let's get everything out. And yeah, but it's, yeah. Okay, but I hope you've given this some thought, because otherwise you will be overwhelmed by the next slide where kind of I spent a while thinking what you can change. So there's this what crop, which variety, what kind of seed. how do you treat the seed before that? Do you put on fungicides? Do you put on microbes? Do you just put water on the seed? How do you till? Which tillage type? How many times? Which depth? All these varieties. And then there's the how to prepare the seed bed, how to fertilize, how to manage the crop, what to do with water. Is there too little water? Do you need to irrigate? Is there too much water? Do you have to take it out? What's the groundwater depth? All this. And then you get to the harvest setting and timing. And then you have to decide what happens after harvest. Do you till it and start a new crop cycle, or do you have a cover crop there on? What do you do? And when you think of like a farmer has to do these decisions always, like for every crop. And usually what happens is that farmers kind of get stuck on something which is good and works. So like I'll plant barley, this variety, I'll put that on the seed, I'll till this way because that works, the seeding depth same as last year, and fertilizer same as last year, and then they're in the space of this which kind of works. And if you think about this, like if you have two variables, you have like a space. If you have three, you have a cube. If you have a farming system, you have the term is a hypercube. It's because if you think about it, you start hyperventilating. So that's the official reason now. It's a multidimensional cube of decisions which defines a cropping year. And once you start experimenting, you can start thinking like, what do I want to change? Is there something which I want to kind of wobble around a bit? And the others are then like the background there. And I mentioned this here because, for example, the soil structure is often, it's critical, but it's not tracked. So soil structure isn't something that you can easily just change, but it's important to kind of document. So like, let's say, if somebody tries no-till versus going with a minimum tillage equipment and gets that the no-till was as good or better than the minimum tillage. So then at least my next question would be that what was the soil structure? And if the soil structure is good, then I would be, yes, if the soil structure is good, there's no reason to kind of manipulate it with tillage. If the soil structure is horrible, then I would be really surprised that the no-till worked because you didn't aerate the soil at all. So kind of these are conditional results you get in agriculture in a way that you kind of, you get an outcome and it depends on what other decisions you made there. I have the word outcome there. It's a bit fuzzy for a purpose because there are different outcomes. If you run an experiment, the two big things you have to decide in an experiment is like, what would you like to see to change? And then is how would you like to see the change happen? So there's a kind of outcome, and then there's the influence. How would you influence that? And let's say, most farmers are really interested in yield. Some are really interested in quality also, especially if it's like there's a quality limit, or then it's direct marketed or whatever. The quality is critical there, which relates to profit. But the other thing which is really interesting is that a lot of farmers are also interested in earthworms. It's some kind of bizarre farmer thing, but more earthworms is good always. And it's kind of, if there's a soil with a lot of earthworms, then people are happy about it. And if there are less earthworms, then people are annoyed by it and want to get more earthworms. So you might like the first question is that what would you want to change? And then maybe related to that, what would you expect to change while you do this? So you might like run an experiment that I would like to increase earthworms and improve soil structure and increase maybe yield, or then maybe nitrogen uptake. That would be a kind of a unit of outcomes which are all related to each other, that this is kind of what I would expect. And then you can go back and think like, what's my intervention here? How would I approach that outcome? Some of these are like probably not relevant to the target. So like harvest settings, harvest timing might not be relevant for earthworms, but others like manure and tillage or groundwater depth would be critical for that. So that gives you kind of an idea on what's the outcome and how would I approach that. Those are the first points in running an experiment. And then these define the appropriate scale and appropriate time scale. So if you're interested in yield, you can actually focus on plants. You could look at like what's the yield in this plant, what's the yield in this plant, and you could run an experiment which is very small, like this big, 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters, for example, could be a measurement unit. Then if you have you'd be interested in ground beetles. They're not in the list, but they're lovely creatures, especially when they are small and you are big. If you are small and they are big, then they are horrible creatures. But ground beetles, anyway, they move like 100 meters around in the field. So if you have a grid this size, it doesn't make any sense. You have to have a larger unit. And for earthworms, for example, we know that there's about 10 times more earthworms on a drainage ditch than between them. So there's a map of a drainage system on a field. And if you happen to, how to say, put your experiment so that you have one treatment on a drainage ditch and the control between them, you just got the result that treatment increases earthworms 10 times, which is not a good thing, because then you kind of made the wrong conclusion there. But if you would have had this setup and your experiment size would have been this big and you would look at plants randomized all over it, it wouldn't be a problem. But kind of the first steps are thinking about the kind of outcome. How do you influence it? What's the scale? Is it going to happen in weeks or in years, and in what big scale? That defines like how do you need to do a field test, or can you just do a mini test in a row of a crop, for example? So these are kind of really critical stuff for deciding how to run an experiment. I'll soon tell you the alternatives for thinking. It's not thinking, and it has some consequences. Let's say, I'm a farmer and a scientist, so sometimes when I do experiments, my end goal is to kind of do science. Most farmers do experiments to improve their farming somehow. So there's a idea of continuous improvement, which is known in industry by this like plan, do, check, act cycle. You figure out, hey, what would happen if I would change this? Is it better? If it's better, yeah, that's the new standard. Let's always do this. So for example, like seeding depth. If you previously seeded to 5 centimeters, let's see what happens if we kind of test changing the seeding depth to 3 centimeters. If you get that, wow, this was really good, then that's the new standard. And I don't know if it happens in Sweden, but in Finland, what happens is that, especially with older farmers, things are first impossible and you can never do that. And then when it becomes the new standard, it's always been done this way. Yeah, the same thing in Sweden, yes. So universal Nordic way of farming. Impossible, always been done this way, yes. The problem here is that if you kind of do things once and you just kind of test that, I put this side of the field into 5, this side of the field to 3 centimeters and see what happens and then decide, is that you don't have any replication. It's random chances, throwing dice. If you throw 1 dice and you get a 4 and you throw 1 dice and you get a 2, is the other dice going to be a super dice, which always produces a double? No. So there's kind of issue. So I just kind of made some random data here, which has the same average, but it's random points from that. That had 1 replicate. This has 5. So this is why farmers don't like to do replication, because once you do 1 experiment, you have clear results. You can say that, no-till is always better, it's 13% better yield. That's what I do. When you do 5 replicates, you go, uh-oh. We need more replicates, is then the conclusion. And then when you have more replicates, then you go that, there's no effect. I cannot brag to my neighbor that this is the right way to do it. It's like, it depends. So on the right, there's a box plot. That's what researchers usually use when they describe data. So it has a line in the middle, which is the median. And then there's a confidence interval, which covers a fair chunk. It depends on the box plot, like what that is. And then there's whiskers there, which describes the whole variation. So usually the idea is that if the boxes do not overlap, then you have a really good effect. And then if the boxes overlap, then you're in a pretty gray zone there. And if the lines are almost equal, then there's probably no effect. And what happens with advisory literature, I'm sure, like, what's the Swedish name for like if farmers get like a magazine which has like advisory guidelines or something. Rådgivning, yeah, that's the term. So quite often in those, they don't like box plots, so they just give a bar. So in this example, they would show the bar with the median, and the farmer would think, and then in the worst case, they would say that the difference isn't significant, but it is 10%. And then as a researcher, I go, no. If it's not significant, you just take it and throw it into the trash and never talk about it again. So it's kind of approach there. So the way to work around this is to run randomized replicated experiments. And they are scary because there's a bit more effort, not a lot more effort, but they are also a way to not fool yourself that this is a lot better when actually it was just sheer luck this time. So how to do this? And why randomization is important is that this is from, the left one is from one of my fields where I ran a tillage experiment. So there were like 4 blocks there going from down to up, and then on each block there are 2 colors. So there's like plowing and minimum tillage to the surface. And for each block, it was randomized, like which way does it go, to avoid, for example, that one ends up always on the drainage and other in between, because it was now mixed. And what happened here is that there was a 15% difference. It's a yield map data there. There's a 15% difference in yield between field halves, the left side and the right side. So if I would have done the normal way, just splitting the field in the middle and plowing one side and not plowing the other, it would have been due to luck, like which would have I got, because the drainage system was broken on one side of the field. And it had nothing to do with tillage or any kind of experiment. So now I actually have a machine there to prove anything. So if I want to say that I don't know, spreading some kind of fertilizer will result in 15% difference in yield, I just get, let's put it there, guaranteed result. So yeah, so that's why it's important to kind of randomize. And if I would have had a replicated randomized trial where I would have like had 6 fields where this would have been done this way, but split and randomized, the chance that I would have always gotten the bad drainage side would be really low. So it's kind of a safeguard for on-field variation. If we would be farming on flower pots with peat, this would be less of an issue, but we're farming on actual soils. So there's variation there, and therefore you need to randomize things not to fool yourself. So a few good designs which combine replication and randomization. One I already mentioned is this kind of blocks in a field. So you put maybe 4, at least 4, because if you have 3 and you mess up 1, you cannot calculate the variance anymore. You just have 2 points. So at least 4 blocks in a field, and then within each block you randomize the like which one goes which side, and then you have a really good experiment. And the dots there are from a yield monitor result, so it's like a combine harvester width and combine harvester length is one point there. These used to be really difficult to do, but now with GPS modules, it's actually really easy to do. You plan it either on paper or on an app, and then you just put on tractor a GPS module connected to the smartphone or the steering unit, and then just kind of drive the edges for each block first to kind of mark them. Then you set up the machinery for, there's purple and blue there for the purple, do all that, and then switch the machine to the blue one, and then do all that. It's like, how to say, 15 minutes extra time for the field instead of kind of doing it the old way, measuring, staking, checking that you're going like extra carefully everywhere is takes a day or 2, and as it is not done, which is the reason farmers usually just when they run an experiment, they do a strip or a half field or something, but GPS helps here. Another even maybe better way here is to have this split field. You just split the field but have multiple fields. And there are 2 versions here. One is for introverted Finnish farmers who don't have any friends. So that's the solo side. Then you take multiple fields of your own farm and then do that. So you have 4 to 10 fields and then you test what happens. And then you have the other for extroverted Swedish farmers who have a kompisar. So then they can do it on over multiple farms, and it's more generalizable, and I kind of usually try to bribe and push and threaten also Finnish farmers to have friends, so they could kind of run these kompisar experiments, because it's usually might happen that like something works for one farmer but not for the other, and then they can have a discussion on what happens, why. Yeah. So the split field is good, but you need to do it on many fields, and preferably if you want to kind of say something generally, like if you the usual response is if you say to your neighbor that no-till works really well, that it's good yield here, and then your neighbor says yes, but not on my fields. The neighbor just might be right, because if you just tested it on your fields, it works on your fields. Then if you have kompisar who have tested it out, also it like for some people it didn't work and for some it did. So those are the good designs there. I think I have 2 more slides here. Does anybody have any questions on the previous or reactions? Because if not, then we'll just have a big discussion in the end. That's okay too. So to enable this, I would recommend a few good tools. The best and cheapest tool is the VES chart. I'm not sure if you have it in Sweden for like translated.
Yeah.
You have translated. What is it?
Well, it's a verktyg för visuell bedömning av markstruktur.
Okay.
I think you guys did it.
Yes, BSAG. Yes, BSAG translated. Yeah. It's some kind of verktyg. Yeah, it's
yeah. I can put it in the chat.
Yeah, excellent.
I can put it in.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, in Finnish it's called MARA, the visual evaluation of soil structure, and because the soil structure is a critical component of the outcome, you have to somehow figure it out. And this learning to do this VES is really useful for all kinds of farming. It's basically you dig a soil profile, take a shovel full of soil, and then compare it to the photos and descriptions, and then score the layers in the soil to kind of look at what's going on. And then, like for example, if you get an outcome and it's on a seriously compacted soil with no earthworms, then you know that this might work here. Then if you do it on another soil which has 35 centimeters of lovely crumbly soil, then it might work different there. So the West chart is really good. If you're working on larger areas, a combined yield monitor is really good also for automated data collection, because otherwise you have to kind of cut every strip separately and weigh the combine harvester, or put it in a kind of a separate bag and weigh that, and that also becomes like a day of work. But if you have a combined yield monitor, then it's like automated data collection. You can drive which way you want, and then you just kind of overlay it with your design. And the third is this GNS GPS guidance. Those units, I put a photo there, is 250 euros. And has 1 centimeter precision with free data. So those used to be 10,000 euros. And now this makes it possible for a farmer to just kind of set up, or an advisor with a farmer to set up an experiment and just kind of start running and get things exactly in the right place. And then, elevation maps, drainage maps are really useful, so that you don't kind of do the, well, like, if you would like to have an experiment where you kind of double the carbon content in a year or a millisecond, or before you even started, you put one part of the experiment on a slope, and then you put the other part on the experiment on the foot of that slope, because erosion has taken all the fine material and dropped it to the foot of the slope. So then when you measure, then you kind of get that, the carbon stock is double here because we something, but that the outcome is guaranteed. So with elevation maps, you can kind of do the right way to do it. If you would like to use the whole field, would be to have like maybe 2 blocks in the hill, 2 blocks in the slope, and then have randomized treatments in each block. And then you would have like pretty good stuff there going on. Now I told you the cheat code, so next year we will have all these results that farmers have multiplied carbon by 10 times and earthworms by 10 times and whatever. Yeah, don't do that. But elevation maps and drainage maps are really good for kind of figuring out how to place the experiment. But this is kind of, so the big first thing is like, what do you want to change? An idea, what could you do to change that? That gives you how long it takes, what's a reasonable unit. Is it 100 meters? Is it 20 centimeters, something in between? Then there's the question like, how do you want to do it? One field, blocks, or multiple field, split fields? And then there's the question, how do I place those? If I do a split field, which is on a slope, maybe I want to kind of cut it at some point to kind of avoid the funny bits there. Yeah, so that's in brief on the why to do experimentation, is to get more flexibility. Otherwise, if you don't do experimentation, you're stuck with one good way that you know that works, and then something happens. 100 millimeters of rain falls and nothing works anymore because it's a surprise. So if you have flexibility, then you can kind of, for example, realize that the seeding density, how many plants per square meter, doesn't influence yield that much. So if it's going to be a really moist year or moist weather with the climate change, you can maybe space plants a bit farther apart, maybe put a cover crop under, and you have potential to get the same yield. So, but it requires testing these out by mini experiments all the time. And like finally, I have this. I have a dream, and this might be a nightmare after 2 years, but now it's a dream. So we've been doing research with 100 farmers in the Carbon Action, and we had like feedback from the farmers that they really loved experimentation. And they started doing experiments on different fields also when they kind of got the experimenting bug in a way. But what they didn't like was that they were doing it alone in a way, that you had farmers doing cover crops and they got results for their own farm, but they didn't get results like, hey, what are my kompisar doing? Like, how did this cover crop work on other farms? And also we tried to give them feedback like every year. For some farmers, we didn't get that. So it was less than like more than a year apart when they got feedback. And they would like to get feedback like maybe every month or every 2 weeks or something like that. Like, is this working? They would like to kind of have feedback so they could change it. So my dream is that we would create this kind of a platform for people to jump on an on-farm experiment. Figure out that, hey, I would like to figure out ways to increase earthworms, for example, and I would like to test how tillage timing influences that in this kind of system. And then there would be a problem to be solved. Other people could jump in on that experiment. A person could register that I'm doing this. I would like to do this. The question is, do you want to do it on a field, on your farm, or on several farms? Several farms. Who are the other farmers? Okay, good. Which fields? And then you would register the experiment there on the fields, maybe contact a research institution or advisory to kind of work with you on this. Then you would get guidance on an experimental design, what to measure, and then you would get satellite monitoring based updates every week on like what's happening on the outcomes. And then you could add your own outcomes. So if you, I wouldn't try to measure earthworms from a satellite, but I would like for the farmers to go digging there in October and doing a few hand counts and then putting that there. So this would kind of, how to say, democratize and make it possible for a lot of farmers to work together on the experiment. So I've shown you how to do experiments in this presentation by yourself or by a few friends, but this could kind of enable us to start doing experiments on a massive scale. So that's the dream, and I hope this helps you in climate adaptation and running more fun experiments in the future. Do we stop recording and start talking?
Yes.
Yeah.